funneling those things through that route so that I'm not, because I will slow it down. I'm one of the worst people in the business to touch stuff. Like if I'm responsible for responding to customer queries or whatever, I'm going to be the slowest person to do it, because ultimately as a business leader, the demand is on my time. And whatever your role is, as a project manager, program manager, whatever, like ultimately that's the game, is increasing the value of your time and being able to either outsource, delegate, automate, hand over things to other people, and you kind of have to play that loop. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I love your points around like what you can do around automating things in your email, and I think for so many people that's the answer.
Hi and welcome to the Sunday Lunch Project Manager podcast for Sunday the 4th of June 2023. This is your host Nigel Creaser, and today I've got part 2 of my chat with Alexis Kingsbury, the business process man. Speak soon. I think it really echoes a lot of the things that I've always kind of tried to talk to other people about, and actually the fact that you're saying there, you get the joy out of seeing someone sort some things out. And I remember showing a client of mine, because whenever the key thing I say about me not reading copied emails is I tell people that I don't read them. And I say, I'm not going to read it. I might reference it later, but don't expect me to read it if you copy me. If you want me to read it, send it me. And I helped her set up that same rule on her, because we talked about it, and then kind of set it up on hers, and she had, I don't know how many thousands of emails in her inbox unread or whatever, and pressed the button and it started, and she saw all these unread, the number going down, click, 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 and 300, 400, whatever the number was, a big number of emails disappeared. And she's like, wow, that you could see a weight starting to lift off them, because that was 400 they didn't have to worry about. And we all do it, and we shouldn't, but email does still, and I think it will be a long time before it changes from that. It will still drive a lot of anxiety, drive a lot of the communication, drive a lot of our, because it's interesting, you see lots and lots of instant message or sort of like Yammer type communications that are always followed up by a weekly email to tell you what was on there. So there's always, it's still
the horrendous amount of noise. I completely agree. It's managing that communication flow is really, really important, like for your own energy and being able to do it. That's why I say, like, often my aim is anything that's important shouldn't be coming to me, which it sounds like a really odd thing to say, but I'm basically saying, invoices, timesheets, payroll, that should all be going to finance. Requests for me to appear on stuff, marketing opportunities, that's all going to marketing. New potential customers, opportunities to work people, that's all going to sales. Support questions, customer success, that's all going to my support team. Like, to some extent, my job is about working out who else is going to do stuff. So I'll tell you now, and in fact, a friend, we were joking about the fact that, I think a WhatsApp group that we were part of had got like 600 unread messages in it. And I said, it's fine. I'm okay with ignoring it, because at some point someone will at me if I need to do something. And they said, I hate to see what your email count is. And I showed them, and there was an audible gasp. And they were trying to guess in the car. We're in a taxi off to a golf game. They're trying to guess how many. And I'll invite you and listeners to play the same game. How many unread emails were in Alexis's email inbox at that point?
So you need to write this down, everybody.
Have a go.
I'm going to guess at 3.
3 unread emails.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's a very brave go. No, you are out by orders of magnitude. The answer at the time was 145,000 plus something.
So I wasn't sure whether you would have marked all of them as unread automatically.
No, I don't even bother. I skim read, and most get ignored, because I get a lot of email. Like, it's not the best way of communicating with me. And as I say, most of the stuff that comes to me is either unsolicited stuff or, stuff that I've had to sign up with because of blah, blah, blah. And I'm able to skim read and see if there is anything that stands out as important, but most of the time it's not. And stuff, I get chased if it is, it does matter. But most of the stuff, I have team members that are responsible for it. So I don't feel that same anxiety that other people would when they're looking at that number, because I have some people say, oh, but why don't you click in it and unsubscribe and so on. It's like, why would I waste my time even doing that? Like, I'm not, there's so much of that kind of stuff, solicited, unsolicited, that it's not even worth my time doing that. Instead, the game I'm playing really is what's important that's in here, that therefore, that either takes up my time or whatever, that genuinely I either need or want to spend my time on. And as a result, how do I get that managed through a more efficient medium? And so that's kind of the game through processes. Like, my everything process, like if there isn't a process that exists for something, then the answer is I have to work it out. You raise it with me in a meeting, or I get some message and I have to work it out and I come up with an answer. That is the least efficient process for how I do it. But it's how I deal with everything that doesn't already have a process. Like an invoice that needs payment, there's a process. A customer that's interested in working with us, they either go and download our brochure at airmanual.link/discover, or if they want a call with us, then you change that last bit to /discover. And then we have various resources like ebooks on AI and all these sorts of things. I know the URLs off by heart because I'm essentially funneling those things through that route, so that I'm not, because I will slow it down. I'm one of the worst people in the business to touch stuff. Like if I'm responsible for responding to customer queries or whatever, I'm going to be the slowest person to do it, because ultimately as a business leader, the demand is on my time. And whatever your role is, as a project manager, program manager, whatever, like ultimately that's the game, is increasing the value of your time and being able to either outsource, delegate, automate, hand over things to other people, and you kind of have to play that loop. So it's an interesting one. I love your points around like what you can do around automating things in your email, and I think for so many people that's the answer. And of course, as you say, like when you were talking about the transcription, the AI stuff is huge. You mentioned using Otter AI, and there's other functionality that's come along. I used like Descript, even Riverside that we're using for this podcast recording now has transcription in it. You can use tools like ChatGPT to then take that transcription and sort out a load of the editing that you mentioned. Rather than have to edit it yourself, you could say, here's common terms that I use that transcription often gets wrong, such as my company name, Air Manual, or my name, here's my name, whatever, and then go, right, here's a transcription, now write it into a proper transcript, and it'll do it all right and lay it out correctly and so on. And that is ultimately, yes, there's a bit of thinking up front there to document that as a process and work out, okay, first I do this, then I do this, then I prompt this. But now you've got something you can improve over time and you can pass to other people. Like, it's game changing when you start doing that through various activities. Because once you start to get the benefit, it's addictive. You start to realize, oh, wait, hang on, I've just saved a day or 2 days of my time by investing this small amount, and you keep on just playing that game, right?
Yeah, I get so frustrated with wait time. That's the thing that bugs the hell out of me, because there's so much in processes where the work is done. It's the time to get it through the next bit of whether it's an approval, whether it's a notification type thing, whether it's having to manually go and check. Like we've had things before when organisations have been with these, where you've had something come to you, but for whatever reason never thought about it. It's uploaded onto a SharePoint site. Great. So in order to find out if your POs come in or whatever it was, you have to go on that SharePoint site. Go on there. And you go on there, and you're waiting for it, and then you go there, and then it doesn't automatically refresh. So you have to press F5 to refresh the screen every 14 seconds. And that's what you spend that day doing, because you need that PO, because you need to get stuff. And then they're just looking at the Power Automate stuff within Microsoft and went, What's that? Let's have a read. Let's have a look. Oh, I can set up a thing, a rule that says this, and send me an email or a
When a
message.
file appears here, it sends me a
Yeah,
notification.
with these criteria. And then I was like, oh, that's it, done. It was a bit, well, my coding skills aren't the greatest. It was a bit Heath Robinson and probably could have been cleaner, and a bit of manual stuff in there, so you could have improved it later. But it just meant that I could do it. And then I've seen that evolve into other situations. But just little things like that. I don't know where I get it from or how, but sometimes I'll be there going, if I'm doing stuff in the kitchen maybe, and it's like I'm making a cup of coffee, making something to eat, tidying away something, I kind of find myself trying to go around the kitchen in the most efficient way to try and multitask it if I can. So if I'm carrying something one way, I want to be carrying something back the other way.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something just wrong with me on that, but that's what kind of makes...
I think that's pretty normal, or at least it's certainly what I do.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's weird. Sometimes you're thinking about doing something efficient, it's going to save you 14 seconds or whatever, but you just that natural looking for those opportunities. And I think with, and maybe that's, again, it's the project management about there. What's the critical path? That's what I'm looking at. What's the critical path to make my cup of tea, isn't it? It's kind of...
and as a result, reducing all this work. That's probably true. And I suppose similar with me, with my sort of background of management consulting, working on improving processes, and so similar thing, right? It's always looking for, where can I eke this out and improve it? And yet we might do it on a cup of tea and then spend 4 hours editing a podcast or whatever, and then go, wait, why have I done that? And I think that's the kicker, right? It's overcoming those mental barriers to kind of do it. But I think also, you highlight a really interesting point around like the technology side, is that I feel like a lot of the technology sort of plateaued for a few years in terms of what was possible, like, or at least the user interface for a lot of technology improved a lot over probably a decade, but actually the nuts and bolts underneath it didn't change that much. And now we've had a fundamental shift with AI and what that empowers us to do, that the game changes. Not just, it's already, over the last couple of years, the amount of AI options and tools that have suddenly become available to the general public has massively increased. But also every day there are more developments that allow us to do stuff. I was working with my engineering team, and we were looking at a particular problem that our clients have, and we were looking at how we could write something that would utilize AI to solve that problem. And we were reflecting on, if we wrote that using standard code, it's the sort of thing that probably would have taken 2-3 weeks to write, and instead we were talking about getting it done in like an afternoon. And that kind of absolute shift is pretty incredible. But I think the challenge for a lot of people is like, but it's changing so quick, or I can't even get my head around, what is all this AI stuff, and is it going to make a difference, and is it just a fad, and so on. And it's for our customers, we wrote a guide which we've now made available to everyone. So if people want it, it's the Business Leader's Guide to Using AI and ChatGPT. It's available at airmanual.link/AI/ebook. And that the intent of that was to cut through all the the hype and whatever, and say, actually, how do you make practical use of this kind of stuff to be efficient, and to and what could disrupt what you're doing, and so on. And I think for project managers, we've been talking about, there's various ways in which, as a project manager, you could use AI to create your project plan, or to help you create a status report, or whatever it is, like to write and send emails to people to chase project status reports, or updates on what they're doing, or clarity on what their blockers are, or whatever. Those things that basically take up huge amounts of your time, and are not particularly exciting, like the best parts of the job, right? The exciting parts are working out how can I reduce this critical path, and we've got this new constraint that's come in, and how can I make sure that I've got this difficult stakeholder that like that's where the value add is. But doing those bits and bobs around the edges, like that stuff can be massively made more efficient, and I think that's quite exciting in terms of what it means, where we can be spending our time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I get a lot of frustration, as I say. There's two things. There were 2 or 3 things. Moving the same information from one system to another. Me manually doing it. Dealing with a lot of these non-essential tasks that actually the value that I add as a squishy human being and as someone who has a relative level of emotional intelligence is about working with that stakeholder, getting to know them, understanding them, and delivering what they really need, and getting them to help me do that. And then with the team, it's the same thing. Ideally, I would have more time understanding those team members. 100%. But 9 times out of 10, I'm just chasing their bleeding timesheet. Or with the customer, I'm just sending a RAG status report to explain why something has happened, or complaining that something. And all of these tools, and I think there's a lot of things where people, is it going to replace my job? Well, yes, it is, but not all of it. No. I listen to a lot of writing podcasts. And a lot of authors are nervous, or people like that, about the fact that you've got ChatGPT can write you a lovely story, a lovely short story. They can write you a long story, and there's tools being used to facilitate and augment people's writing. And it's going to happen. It's going to get used. It's the next phase of Grammarly. Do you know what I mean? It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But with that creativeness about it, but then it's going to be how you're going to do that, because still you can't at the moment, and I don't think it would get to that. You go, right, can you write me a story about something, please, that I can publish as a book to ChatGPT? Now, it probably could, but it wouldn't produce something that would be there. That pivotal element of that idea that you need to have as your idea, as you as a human, is the bit where we add. And then the same with that art, what I would think of as the art bit, the art of managing and understanding that stakeholder's requirement, understanding the team dynamic, joining those two together and making that happen. That's the power. And
agreed.
At the moment, and I'm wrong, I can't see where the AI and that sort of stuff does anything more than augment that capability. There's still a core thing running through the middle that is us, that has to be there.
Yeah, and I think the way to look at it is it's a collaborative technology. It's the thing I love about it, and the way to use it is that it has to be a back and forth. Like I came across a piece of AI recently where you could take a YouTube video, for example, of this conversation, and you could use Opus AI, where you basically give it the link and it will create a series of short videos, 30, 40, 50 seconds, like you would create in Headliner, but it will essentially do that automatically by sort of looking at creating a transcription, picking the bits of content, all that kind of stuff. Like basically going to save you having to spend that pocket money.
I've noted that.
Pocket money. So sorry that they've lost their jobs on that. But and that's great. But it's not picking the messaging to put out there. So it doesn't know what are the key points that that are part of your brand or your values, or that link into an offer or whatever that you're making at the moment. So it doesn't have that sophistication. That's why it has to be collaborative. Now, Opus is an example of a clever AI, but one that doesn't yet provide that sort of back and forth, whereas ChatGPT is very, very clever AI that definitely does. And so you can create a book, as you say, by having that insight that you give. But a great example of that relates to like project management and so on, be that right now there are add-ons that you can put into Google Sheets that allow you to essentially prompt ChatGPT. Now, what that means is that you could say, right, in a cell in a Google Sheet, you could say, right, these cells, I'm going to give you some data, which are the last, let's say, 5 weeks of what might we use for project management, like burn down or something like that, right? We could use some kind of productivity metric. And we could say, write a sentence that summarizes any trend. And so it essentially would send that off as a query to ChatGPT and go, right, here's the data, and it would give a trend. So it might say, yeah, it's currently trending downwards, da, 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 da. Now you could say, oh, but it's not smart enough to know that actually it said that it's going down and it's described it as being a good thing, but actually that particular metric, it needs to be going up for it to be a good thing. And actually, it's less about whether it's going up or down. What I want it to be is stable, and consistency is important. It's like, but you can tell it that. Yeah. So you could put that into the, like, let's say that
this is what's good, this is what's bad, this is what's okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So if you get output and you're like, oh, it's not very clever because it thinks this, it's like, great, tell it. So now you can say, okay, here's the numbers, da, da, da. Good. Like, ideally we're looking for consistency. However, if it's going to be not consistent, then going higher is better. Going down, like, you can set parameters and write that in normal language rather than have to do some really complex, like, if this and then that and all these sorts of things and conditional formatting, whatever. Instead, you could just tell it that, and then it will write you your report. It'll write your RAG status report and say, this is green and this is da da da. Like, you could have it do that. Obviously there's work up front and you have to put your smarts in there, and you need to review it to make sure that it makes sense, because you don't want to just be chucking that out each week, because when your boss or the client says, like, this doesn't make sense to me, you've said that this is like it's, the buck stops with you. So you've still got to do the review, you've still got to go and have the conversation, and ultimately you want to be spending the time not on producing the report but on saying, so what? Like, so if our productivity,
what do we do now?
All over the place, okay, what can we do about this? You're like, that's where you want to be spending the time. And I think that's what all of this is about, is it's a collaborative tool. I think the temptation for some people is either to get one result out of it and go, that's amazing, and then not really work out how to build it into their day-to-day business, like, activities and processes, or to see it produce something poorly. Like, we've all perhaps seen images of AI produced images of people that don't look quite right, or the hands aren't right, and there's too many fingers.
Extra fingers,
A good example, like our ebook, like you'll see the image we've got of the octopus. If you look at some video, this will make more sense. But for audio, like, on the front of our guide, there's a picture of the octopus. Now, we asked it for an octopus with some speech bubbles, and it does a fair job. But what do you notice about the octopus? It's got too many legs. And that's because Midjourney, the AI tool, doesn't automatically understand that when you're doing an octopus, it should have 8 legs. And so stuff like that means that some people throw it out. They go like, oh, but it doesn't understand this, it doesn't. And it's like, yeah, it's a collaboration tool. You have to go back and forth. In the same way as even a spelling or grammar checker doesn't get it right always.
No.
It will try and correct people's names, company names, all these sorts of things, and you have to have the smarts and so on to go, no, actually, in this case, ignore that. So, I think
there's lots of project mangers in my project reports. Project Manger is Project Manger is one I used a lot for some reason, because my typing is so poor, but it doesn't get picked up.
Yeah, exactly. It's spelled perfectly. It's all those Project Mangers where we keep our baby projects.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it is fascinating, and I think it's one of these subjects which. It's every other article in LinkedIn has got that on there nowadays, and it's about the AI stuff and the impact. It's going to be massive and huge in there, and obviously, and we talk about it here because it's from a project management point of view. Process is something that can get in the way, and it can be something that can enable the project. At the end of the day, the processes don't get the work done; people do.
Yeah.
And sometimes, and I think from our discussion, and we'll talk about Air Manual a little bit now, if that's all right. And I know we're just coming up on the hour, so we're running quite well on this one. Something I noticed the other day that struck me is that there was a situation where you've got a process that's really well documented, lovely workflow, looked great, fantastic. To the right management level, it looks like you've got processes in place. And then I was trying to use a process, and I was sitting there going, yeah, but what do I do?
Yeah.
I said, I know what needs to happen, but what do I do? What is the procedure for each of those process steps? It sat underneath it. And in this instance, I couldn't find out where it was. And it struck me the thing that how often and maybe an organisation will go, here's all our processes, it's all fantastic, we've just spent thousands of pounds on a consulting organisation, they've done us loads of Visio diagrams, we've now all got a license for Visio,
Yeah.
we now we can manage our business processes. But then when you get someone comes in who doesn't understand what's going on and saying, yeah, but what do I need to send John to get him to actually approve that? Or what do they need in order? And those bits underneath. And from our discussions and what I've round with Emmanuel, I think you kind of drop down into that layer without it being a library full of Word documents.
Correct.
That are kind of just put on a shelf and never looked at and never updated. And you've got this process flow that no one can find a Word document attached to it. And I get the feeling from talking to you that Air Manual does that. So we give a bit of a plug for Air Manual. Just tell us about how that works and how that helps people.
Yeah, so that's a really good observation, because I think what you're picking up there is really my biggest frustration back when I was a management consultant sorting out processes for big companies, because that's exactly what I do. It'd be brown paper on the wall and moving the post-it notes around to work out what the optimal process would be, and then I'd take that away, and in the evening I'd then type that up into some Visio diagrams or Casewise or whatever it was, maybe even PowerPoint if they decided they didn't want to use those tools. And then we'd print that in A0 and or get it laminated or whatever, and it goes up on the wall. And exactly as you say, like, you've got that high level process, but then how do you make sure that people do it? And when you bring someone else into the organization and say, right, yeah, you're in charge of, let's say, working with finance processes, it's like you're in charge of doing the procurement stuff and procuring, like, when it's at a high level, it's very difficult to actually know, but what do I do, and the steps. And so it takes a long time for people to get up to speed, and even then they don't do things quite right, and things are done inconsistently, and there's mistakes and whatever. And yet, in theory, we've got this really efficient process that's stuck on the wall, but for some reason we don't seem to have reduced the amount of headcount that it takes to do it. And I think that's the problem. Is you have a similar thing with like stage gates in projects. We're working with a division of Sony, where they had got this project team who had got these stage gates of a particular project process, which is fantastic. You want these milestones so that you're not working on things that haven't been approved and so on. But the problem was that they didn't have the detail clarity on what are the series of things that need to happen so that you can get to a point that you get approval to go to the next step. And so everything was either sloppy or painful, because either it was sloppy because it's kind of like, well, we haven't produced all these things, but this is a priority project anyway, so let's just start. And yet, actually, we hadn't technically produced this project plan or agreed or re-reviewed this project plan with the client or the internal stakeholder. And as a result, guess what? It bites us on the bum, months later when we've spent so much time developing it. Or it was frustrating because you'd have key stakeholders that are just basically pushing these project managers back and saying, no, I can't approve this. And yet the project manager's not even clear what they need to do. And so what we did, exactly as you say in Air Manual, we kind of bridged that gap. So in Air Manual, you can create your high level, create your outline of, here's the processes that I have in this area. So for example, project management, as a project manager, here's the high level processes that I have, how to recommend a project, how to provide a status update, but also how to manage a project end to end through these 5 stage gates, right? So you'd have those. But then crucially, you can add essentially infinite levels of further detail where needed. You don't want to add it just everywhere, like where needed. But in Air Manual, it essentially concertinas it so that you click to expand and click to expand, which means that I can look at this particular project management process. I can look at it and see it on one screen, like one page, if you like. I can see the entire thing. But then I can click and I can open up let's say the agree project proposal stage, and I can see that's made of 6 steps. And one of the steps is to capture the requirements from into the stakeholders, and I can click on that and it expands that, and I can see exactly what are the steps that are expected of me as a project manager when I'm capturing that input, and what are and I can click on a little help content of suggested questions to ask, or when I get to the question on what's the impact this will have, there's a little help content that goes, what if the stakeholder's struggling to quantify the impact, like, and there's a little thing that explains all that. But I don't need all of that detail when I'm trying to just see what are the 5 stage gates, or or one level detail. And that's the key difference. Like what we found back when I was a process consultant, we'd create these Visio maps, and then you'd create a load of Word documents which were work instructions. Problem is that they don't marry up and so on. So if I change one, the Visio one, it's then now a massive load of work to change the Word documents and so on. Plus the Word documents were like 60 pages and no one likes looking at them. You can't follow them like to do the work because you go off and do something else and you come back and go, where was I? Was I on page 32 or 40? Like you spend more time doing that and you go, I might as well, I'll just do it from memory. Like I think I need to do this. And so we created Air Manual as a tool that means that it's faster to do the work using the checklist. You know, like it's a bit like, I've got a funny example. My kids, age 7 and 9, they have got a checklist that they use every Sunday to get their bags ready for school for the week ahead. So that's getting the swimming kit ready, getting their PE kit, their games kit, getting the snacks in their bag, making sure their bag's got their books, their pencil case, their water bottle, all these sorts of things. Super easy to forget any one of those, right? Including for me as an adult. And so it makes sense and it's helpful to have a checklist. And of course, they've done it lots of times, so you can use memory, but the key is it has to be faster to use it. And that's what the big insight that we had for Air Manual was like, you need to remove the friction. Because as soon as there's the friction around, I have to open the Word document and then I have to find the various bits and whatever, suddenly it's like you've lost already. Like that's a team member who's just going to avoid doing that wherever possible. And so that's why we kind of created Air Manual to remove all of that friction, make it super easy to use. And as a result, like, my team members, when they do stuff in their normal day-to-day role, so for example my salespeople, when they're on discovery calls with customers, they're using a checklist live on the call, collecting data as part of it. In fact, you mentioned earlier about when we were talking about freeing up our times using systems, one of the things that we're just in the process of releasing and adding is automations, which means that one of the things that my team do, they follow the checklist on a discovery call, and at the end they click complete checklist and it sends the data into the CRM and sends a message in Slack. You mentioned that you hate copying and pasting between systems. Like that's an example where
winds me up.
And we took the follow-up from a discovery call from an hour down to less than 10 minutes by putting that in place. But the key is that wouldn't work if the team didn't feel comfortable using the checklist for every single sales call, every single discovery call they have, they use the checklist to do it. And that's the difference. Like you wouldn't expect that from someone with a Word document. You wouldn't expect them to be like, I'm going to use this Word document every single time. So that's why we created Air Manual, was because essentially we'd had that pain in our own businesses, had solved it using or sort of partly solved it using a mix of tools that was messy. And you mentioned like your own coding and how it was all a bit Heath Robinson. That's kind of how it used to be for us until we kind of built Air Manual to solve that problem. And now we get to work with loads of organizations to help them sort of solve these problems without having to go through all the pain and suffering that we put our teams through, frankly.
Yeah, it sounds ideal, and it's that sort of thing that you want within a project. You want that within an organisation, really, don't you? And I suppose it's how you can do that. But I think there's a key thing is, even if the organisation doesn't fit into that, getting new tools, because obviously getting new tools in organisations is different. But taking that mindset of, and I like the way that you described that, is that kind of thing where meeting the person where they're at, and kind of if you've got someone who is in front of their laptop, is on a mobile phone, and this is part to do with the communication channels in general, but if you're making something that someone can, there's no barrier to entry for it. It's easy to do, and that's why I for the years I've been trying to look at different things of automating using my Echo to be able to just put it on my multiple to-do lists, put an action on there that would end up flowing through to whichever one, whether it be my personal, my work email, but having the getting things done concept of trying to get one place of tasks to do. I just want to, because what I want to be able to do, depending on what I've got in my hand or what I'm stood by, I want to use that device. Now, whether it's an audio device, whether it's the phone, or whether it's if I'm driving and I can't touch stuff, or I'm on a laptop, or I'm in an internet kiosk in Havana, which just I want to be in a position where there's nothing going to stop me and accessing, and nothing's going to stop me interacting with my management techniques and tools for me. And I kind of got part way there in different things. It's now 9:30. It's late for you, I know, and you've got young children. Like you're gonna have to get them up in the morning. Is there? I think we can wrap it here. I'm sure that we could have another chat in 12 or 18 months,
come back.
And everything will have changed. And from a point of view of AI and all that sort of stuff, so we could go out now, and there's better be new stuff. But if there was one thing you'd want to say to the project management community that's listening to the podcast about your sort of view on that productivity, on that improving delegation, or on Air Manual, what's the one thing you'd like to say to them?
Yeah, so I'd say that if you want to get great performance and consistent results, then you need that clarity, that certainty around the right way to do things. And ultimately that comes down to having your documented processes, your project management process, and so on. And project managers get this, right? They know that doing certain things in project management gets you better results. And I think the more that you can make sure that those steps, that clarity is documented, and that gives you incredible power. It gives you the power to make sure that things are done consistently. It makes you possible to make it more efficient, either by delegation, simplification, automation, using AI, and so on. But it also can give you a bit of sanity as well, because you're ultimately able to see what needs to be done and go through that process of identifying where's my low value, medium value, high value tasks, so that you're consistently saying, even if there is a process that does make sense that it's you, even having it documented at the moment at least means that you can do it more efficiently, you can improve it, you can be confident that someday maybe you'll hand it over, but right now it's fine. But it means that you've kind of got that roadmap for it. So I think that would be my key takeaway for people, is to ultimately look at where you're spending your time, challenge that, and make sure that you're making time for what matters most.
Brilliant. If people want to find out more, want to get in touch with you, whatever, what's the best way to get hold of you?
Yeah, sure. So for information about Air Manual specifically, so you can find the Air Manual at airmanual.co. There's a few resources that I mentioned, including our guide on AI and ChatGPT and how to get to grips with it, as at airmanual.link/AI/ebook. We also have a brochure about AI, about Air Manual, about our approach, and a 4-stage approach that makes delegation and so on much easier, and how you can use process to reduce mistakes, get onboarding of employees really fast, and all these sorts of things. People can find that at airmanual.link/discover. From there, you can also then, I think there's a link on the back of the brochure to arrange a call with our team. So I highly recommend those. I do also run a regular webinar on how to free up 15 hours a week and unlock growth. So for anyone who's a leader in the organization, project manager in the organization, looking to help the organization to free up time, people can check that out at airmanual.co/webinar or airmanual.link/webinar. Both work for that. And then connecting with me, connect with me on social media, Alexis Kingsbury. I am particularly active on LinkedIn, but you can find me on most of the other forms as well. Or you can email me at alexis.kingsbury@airmanual.co, but know that it's not going into my inbox. It's managed by my team.
Someone will look after it.
But you're welcome to reach out, if you want to explore collaboration, learn more about how to partner and so on. So I'd love for people to reach out, and social media is a great place to do that. If you found this useful, share a key takeaway on social media, tag me in, I will see it. It's the best way of connecting with me.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Alexis, and have a fantastic rest of your evening. Thanks very much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks very much for having me here, Nigel.
Brilliant. Cheers.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Alexis. If you jump in the show notes, you can get along to Emmanuel and get access to their tools and techniques, which looks great, some great stuff there. And I had a great demo from one of Alexis's team a few weeks ago, and can really see how it could benefit. So jump along there, have a go, and well, speak soon. See you then. Bye. So this is my final wrap up. Every week you're going to hear this, you're going to get bored of it, but you can always click next podcast if so. If you have enjoyed it, if you listened to this podcast to the end of this show and you think that was great, I'd love to be able to help Nigel out. There are loads of ways you can do it. The first and obvious way is to share the podcast, send it out to people. If you know colleagues and friends who'd benefit from it, you think they'd enjoy it, just send them the link. Grab one of the links, or send them to www.nigelcreaser.com/podcasts. That's www.nigelcreaser.com/podcasts, and that will push them over to a Linktree link, and it's got all of the different ways they can consume the podcast. If you are feeling generous and have a big bag of cash, you could grab a copy of one of my books. Obviously, they're available in all the usual places, in print and digital. Again, jump on the website, www.nigelcreaser.com/shop, and that will give you a list of all the different ways that you can contribute and grab copies of the book. Also got links to all my guests' books on there as well, where I get a little bit of a kickback from them. If you are of a sporting mind, I have a number through doing some of my judo and running antics. I've managed to secure a few affiliate links and affiliates there as well. So in there, somewhere in the sponsors page, there's links to those as well. So clicking onto those and grabbing if you're looking to get super fit, then that would be fabulous as well, and I get a little kickback from those. I have a Patreon account. It's patreon.com/sundaylunchpm. So again, you can ping something in there, buy me a coffee or whatever. And finally, obviously the most important is coming back, listen again, because the more of you that come back, the more visibility I get, because there's more times that it's downloaded and all the SEO works and things like that. So yeah, that's it. So if you can help me out, I would be much appreciated. If you can't, don't worry about it. Thank you very much. Cheers now. Bye.
Well, it's goodbye from me, Nigel Creaser, and it's goodbye from him, the Sunday Lunch PM. Goodbye.
Introduction. Hi, and welcome to Project Manager Productivity Hacks. Why write another book on productivity hacks? Are there not enough of them already? The trigger was my interview with Sarah M. Hoban for my podcast, the Sunday Lunch Project Manager Podcast. Plug. Find out more at www.nigelcreaser.com/Sarah M. Hoban. We talked about improving productivity for project managers, and during the conversation I recalled that a while ago I started a blog post in which I plan to share some ideas that I have used in my career to improve my productivity and get out of the office that little bit earlier. Over the years I have shared these with others, and almost every time I received a positive and enthusiastic response. Having rekindled the idea, I sat down and noted 11 hacks, tips, shortcuts, whatever you want to call them, that I have used over the years. Why 11? Well, it's one more than 10. This book goes up to 11. One for the Spinal Tap fans. I see productivity as remarkably similar to an exercise program. We all start off with good intentions, and some of the changes work great for us and others don't. Some changes stick and become part of our daily life, whereas others are just a real chore. Even the ones we found that work well for us and are straightforward to implement can, under certain circumstances, end up being dropped by us. Sometimes this happens consciously, and sometimes little by little over time. Whether building healthier habits or improving our productivity, it's not just a case of making the changes, and we are done. It takes repeated work. If you find them hard to implement, then they may not be for you in your current situation. If you start using them and end up letting them drift, then start again. Improving our productivity is something many of us strive to achieve, aiming for some kind of efficiency nirvana. Let me tell you, it ain't gonna happen. Perfection is a myth. Give yourself a break. It's a bit like yoga. You can't win at yoga. No matter how bendy you get, you can always be bendier. That's the same with personal productivity. You can't win at productivity. You can always be productivier.
Ed, is that a word?
I have not always been able to apply these hacks successfully, but that is not a reflection of the hacks themselves. It is more about my ability to stick with them even though I know they work. One last point, as with your fitness regime, trying to make loads of changes at once can spell disaster. I recommend that once you have a read of these hacks, choose one that excites you, maybe not excites but seems to resonate, and have a go at it. Once it is second nature to you, move on to the next one that spoke to you. If you find that the first one was not for you, then bin it. Choose another and try that one out, then rinse and repeat. So on with the hacks.